Okay, class, it's chapter 8 of Ender's Game, Rat. Colonel Graff, the games have always been run fairly before, either random distribution of stars or symmetrical. Fairness is a wonderful attribute, Major Anderson. It has nothing to do with war. The game will be compromised. The comparative standings will become meaningless. Alas. It will take months, years to develop the new battle rooms and run the simulations. That's why I'm asking you now. To begin, be creative. Think of every stacked, impossible, unfair star arrangement you can. Think of other ways to bend the rules, late notification, unequal forces. Then run the simulations and see which ones are hardest, which easiest. We want an intelligent progression here. We want to bring him along. When do you plan to make him a commander? When he's 8? Of course not. I haven't assembled his army yet. Oh, so you're stacking it that way too? You're getting too close to the game, Anderson. You're forgetting that it's merely a training exercise. It's also status, identity, purpose, name. All the things that make these children who they are comes out in the games. When it becomes known that the game can be manipulated, weighted, cheated, it will undo the whole school. I'm not exaggerating. I know. So I hope Ender Wiggin truly is the one, because you'll have degraded the effectiveness of our training method for a long time to come. If Ender isn't the one, if his peak of military brilliance does not coincide with the arrival of our fleet at the Bugger homeworlds, then it doesn't really matter what our training method is or isn't. I hope you will forgive me, Colonel Graff, but I feel that I must report your orders and my opinion of their consequences to the strategos at the Hedgeman. Why not our dear Polemarch? Everyone knows you have him in your pocket. Such hostility, Major Anderson. And I thought we were friends. We are. And I think you may be right about Ender. I just don't believe you, and you alone, should decide the fate of the world. I don't even think it's right for me to decide the fate of Ender Wiggin. So you won't mind if I notify them? Of course I mind. This is something to be decided by people who know what they're doing, not these frightened politicians who got their offices because they happen to be politically potent in the country they come from. But you understand why I'm doing it. Because you're such a short-sighted little bureaucratic bastard that you think you need to cover yourself in case things go wrong. Well, if things go wrong, we'll all be bugger meat. So trust me now, Anderson, and don't bring the whole damn hegemony down on my neck. Hegemony. What I'm doing here is enough without them. Hegemony. Oh, is it unfair? Are things stacked against you? You can do it to Ender, but you can't take it. Is that it? Ender Wiggin is 10 times smarter and stronger than I am. What I'm doing to him will bring out his genius. If I had to go through it myself, it would crush me. Major Anderson, I know I'm wrecking the game. I know you love it better than any of the boys who play. Hate me if you like, but don't stop me. I reserve the right to communicate with the hegemony the way the strategio joy at any time. But for now, do what you want. Thank you so very kindly. Ender Wiggin, the little farthead who leads in the standings, what a pleasure to have you with us. The commander of Rat Army lay sprawled on the lower bunk, wearing only his desk. With you around, how can any army lose? Several of the boys nearby laughed. There could not have been two more opposite armies than Salamander and Rat. The room was rumpled, cluttered, noisy. After Bonzo, Ender had thought that undisciplined would be a welcome relief. Instead, he found that he had come to expect quiet and order, and the disorder here made him uncomfortable. We doing okay, Ender? Ender Bender? Aye, Rose de Nose, Chew Boy Extraordinaire, and you ain't nothing but a pinprick of a goy. Don't you forget it. Since the IF was formed, the strategos of the military forces had always been a Jew. There was a myth that Jewish generals didn't lose wars. And so far as was still true, it made every Jew in battle school dream of being strategos and conferred privilege upon him from the start. It also caused resentment. Rat Army was also in half praise, half parody of Mazer Rackham's strike force. There were many who like to remember that during the second invasion, even though an American Jew as a president, the hegemony even though an American Jew as president was hegemon of the alliance, an Israeli Jew was strategos in overall command of the IF defense, and the Russian Jew was Polmarch of the fleet. It was Mazer Rackham, a little-known, twice court-martialed, half-Maori New Zealander whose strike force broke up and finally destroyed the bugger fleet in the action around Saturn. If Mazer Rackham could save the world, then it didn't matter a bit whether you're Jew or not, people said. But it did matter, and Rose the Nose knew it. He mocked himself to forestall the mocking comments of the anti-Semites. Almost everyone he defeated in battle became, at least for a time, a Jew hater, but he also made sure that everyone knew who he was. His army was in second place, bucking for first. I took you on, Goy, because I didn't want people to think I only win because I got great soldiers. I want them to know that even with a little puke of a soldier like you, I can still win. We only got 3 rules here. Do what I tell you and don't piss the bed. Ender nodded. He knew that Rose wanted him to ask what the 3rd rule was, so he did. That was 3 rules. We don't do good math here. Or that was 3 rules. We don't do good math here. The message was clear. Winning is more important than anything. Your practice sessions with half-assed little launchies are over, Wigan. Done. You are in a big boy's army now. I'm putting you in Dink Meeker's tune. From now on, as far as I'm concerned, Dink Meeker is God. Then who are you? The personal officer who hired God. Rose grinned. And you are forbidden to use your desk again until you've frozen 2 enemy soldiers in the same battle. This order is out of self-defense. I hear you're a genius programmer. I don't want you screwing around with my desk. Everyone erupted in laughter. It took Ender a moment to understand why. Rose had programmed his desk to display an animated... Rose had programmed his desk to display an animated, bigger-than-life face waggling its tongue back and forth as Rose held the desk on his lap. This was just the sort of commander Bonzo would trade me to, thought Ender. How does a boy who spends his time like this win battles? Ender found Dink Meeker in the game room, not playing, just sitting and watching. A guy pointed you out, Ender said. I'm Ender Wigan. I know, said Meeker. I'm in your tune. I know, he said again. I'm pretty inexperienced. Dink looked up at him. Look, Wigan, I know all this. Why do you think I asked Rose to get you for me? He had not been dumped. He had been picked up. He had been asked for. Meeker wanted him. Why? Asked Ender. I've watched your practice sessions with the launchies. I think you show some promise. Bonzo is stupid, and I wanted you to get better training than Petra could give you. All she can do is shoot. I needed to learn that. You still move like you're afraid to wet your pants, so teach me. So learn. I'm not going to quit my free time practice sessions. I don't want you to quit them. Rose the Nose does. Rose the Nose can't stop you. Likewise, he can't stop you from using your desk. So why did he order it? Listen, Ender. Commanders have just as much authority as you let them have. The more you obey them, the more power they have over you. What's stopping them from hurting me? Ender remembered Bonzo's blow. I thought that was why you were taking personal attack classes. You've really been watching me, haven't you? Dink didn't answer. I don't want to get Rose mad at me. I want to be part of the battles now. I'm tired of sitting out till the end. Your standings will go down. This time Ender didn't answer. Listen, Ender. As long as you're part of my tune, you're part of the battle. Ender soon learned why. Dink trained his tune independently from the rest of Rat Army, with discipline and vigor. He never consulted with Rose, and only rarely did the whole army maneuver together. It was as if Rose commanded one army and Dink commanded a much smaller one that happened to practice in the battle room at the same time. Dink started out the first practice by asking Ender to demonstrate his feet-first attack position. The other boys didn't like it. How can we attack lying on our backs, they asked. To Ender's surprise, Dink didn't correct them, didn't say, You aren't attacking on your back. You're dropping downwards towards them. He had seen what Ender was doing, but he had not understood the orientation that it implied. It was soon clear to Ender that even though Dink was very, very good, his persistence in holding on to the quarter gravity orientation instead of thinking of the enemy gate as downwards was limiting his thinking. They practiced attacking an enemy-held star. Before trying Ender's feet-first method, they had already gone in standing up, their whole bodies available as target. Even now, though they reached the star, they assaulted the enemy from one direction only. "Over the top," cried Dink, and over they went. To his credit, he then repeated the exercise again, upside down, but because of their insistence on a gravity that didn't exist, the boys became awkward when the maneuver was under, as if vertigo seized them. They hated the feet-first attack. Dink insisted that they use it. As a result, they hated Ender. "Do we have to learn how to fight from a launchy?" one of them muttered, making sure Ender could hear. "Yes," answered Dink. They kept working. And they learned it. In practice skirmishes, they began to realize how much harder it was to shoot an enemy who was attacking feet first. As soon as they were convinced of it, they practiced the maneuver more willingly. That night was the first time Ender had come to one of his launchy practice sessions after a whole afternoon of work. He was tired. "Now you're really in an army," said Eli. "You don't have to keep practicing with us." "From you I learn things that nobody knows," said Ender. "Dink Meeker is the best. I hear he's your tune leader. Then let's get busy. I'll teach you what I learned from him today." He put Eli and 24 others through the same exercises that had worn him out all afternoon. But he put new touches on the patterns, made the boys try the maneuvers with one leg frozen, with both legs frozen, or using frozen boys for leverage to change directions. Halfway through the practice, Ender noticed Petra and Dink together, standing in the doorway watching. Later, when he looked again, they were gone. "So they're watching me, and what we're doing is known." He did not know whether Dink was his friend. He believed that Petra was, but nothing could be sure. They might be angry that he was doing what only commanders and tune leaders are supposed to do, drilling and training soldiers. They might be offended that a soldier would associate so closely with launchies. It made him uneasy to have older children watching. "I thought I told you not to use your desk." Rose the Nose stood by Ender's bunk. Ender did not look up. "I'm completing the trigonometry assignment for tomorrow." Rose bumped his knee into Ender's desk. "I said not to use it." Ender set the desk on his bunk and stood up. "I need trigonometry more than I need you." Rose was taller than Ender by at least 40 centimeters, but Ender was not particularly worried. It would not come to physical violence, and if it did, Ender thought he could hold his own. Rose was lazy and did not know personal combat. You're going down in the standings, boy," said Rose. "I expect to. I was only leading the list because of the stupid way Salamander Army was using me." "Stupid?" Bonzo's strategy won a couple of key games. "Bonzo's strategy wouldn't win a salad fight. I was violating orders every time I fired my gun." Rose hadn't known that. It made him angry. "So everything Bonzo said about you is a lie. You're not only short and incompetent, you're insubordinate too." "But I turned defeat into stalemate, all by myself." "We'll see how you do all by yourself next time." Rose went away. One of Ender's tune mates shook his head. "You're dumb as a thumb." Ender looked at Dink, who was doodling on his desk. Dink looked up, noticed Ender watching him, and gazed steadily back at him. No expression. Nothing. "Okay," thought Ender. "I can take care of myself." Battle came 2 days later. It was Ender's first time fighting as part of a tune. He was nervous. Dink's tune lined up against the right-hand wall of the corridor, and Ender was very careful not to lean, not to let his weight slip to either side. Stay balanced. "Wiggin!" called Rose the Nose. Ender felt dread come over him, from throat to groin, a tingle of fear that made him shudder. Rose saw it. Shivering, trembling. "Don't wet your pants, little launchy." Rose hooked a finger over the butt of Ender's gun and pulled him into the force field that hid the battle room from view. "We'll see how well you do now, Ender. As soon as the door opens, you jump through. Go straight ahead towards the enemy's door." Suicide. Pointless, meaningless self-destruction. but he had to follow orders now. This was battle school, not school. For a moment, Ender raged silently, then calmed himself. "Excellent, sir," he said. "The direction I fire my gun is the direction of their main contingent. Rose laughed. "You won't have time to fire anything, pinprick." The wall vanished. Ender jumped, took hold of the ceiling handholds, and threw himself out and down, speeding towards the enemy door. It was Centipede Army, and they only began to emerge from the door when Ender was halfway across the battle room. Many of them were able to get under cover of stars quickly, but Ender had doubled up his legs under him and was holding his pistol at his crotch, and he was firing between his legs, freezing many of them as they emerged. They flashed his legs, but he had 3 precious seconds before they could hit his body and put him out of action. He froze several more, then flung his arms in equal and opposite directions. The hand that held his gun ended up pointing towards the main body of the Centipede Army. He had fired into the mass of the enemy, and then they froze him. A second later, he smashed through the force field of the enemy door, rebounded in a crazy spin. He landed in a group of enemy soldiers behind a star. They shoved him off and spun him even more rapidly. He rebounded out of control through the rest of the battle, though gradually friction with the air slowed him down. He had no way of knowing how many men he had frozen before getting iced himself, but he did get the general idea that Rat Army won again, as usual. After the battle, Rose didn't speak to him. Ender was still first in the standings, since he had frozen 3, disabled 2, and damaged 7. There was no more talk about insubordination and whether Ender could use his desk. Rose stayed in his parts of the barracks, and they left Ender alone. Dink Meeker began to practice instant emergence from the corridor. Ender's attack on the enemy while they were still coming out the door had been devastating. If one man can do that much damage, think of what a tune can do. Dink got Major Anderson to open a door in the middle of the wall, even during practice sessions, instead of just the floor level, so they could practice launching into battle conditions. Word got around. From now on, one could take 5 or 10 or 15 seconds in the corridor to size things up. The game had changed. More battles. This time, Ender played a proper role within a tune. He made mistakes. Skirmishes were lost. He dropped from first to second in the standings, then fourth. Then he made fewer mistakes, began to feel comfortable with the framework of the tune, and he went back up to third, then second, then first. We might have to pause there.